All right, let's go.
I just finished. Oh my God. I love it.
I am so excited. I have finished my Tortured Poets Department cardigan. I knit this myself. I self-drafted it, and you can too if you want. I have links to everything down below for my charts and my notes. But this video is gonna be kind of a long one. I will start off just by kind of explaining everything I think that you need to know about this pattern, and then I will get into a little tutorial and then kind of a vlog of my process of it. With the release of Folklore, Taylor Swift released a cardigan to go with the song Cardigan. And ever since then, she has been releasing a new color for that same cardigan style for every album that's come since. Except Evermore, I don't think. Anyway, I have knit the Folklore cardigan as well. I can link to a video about that. I really heavily modified mine, and I was expecting with the Tortured Poets Department that she would release that same cardigan again in just a different color, maybe white or gray or black. So I was really genuinely surprised when she released a completely different style cardigan, totally different cables, different shapes for the Tortured Poets Department. And I took a bunch of screenshots of it, and I'm really glad that I did because I went to look again this morning. I have like the URL saved and it's gone. It's just like fully gone from the website, which I've never seen before. Granted, I've never tried to go back to an item of merch that's unavailable, so I don't know if they normally take down pieces, but maybe at this point, the only way that you can get this cardigan is to make it yourself. So let's get into it. I have links to absolutely everything down below in the description, and there should be also like time chapters to allow you to skip around in this video to see what exactly it is that you want to see. And the first link that you're going to see is a link to my Ravelry pattern for this project. Now I hesitate to call this like a pattern really because it's more of my notes and my best shot at writing a pattern for this, but for just my size, it is not graded to other sizes. But it has all of my charts and really thorough instructions of what I did to knit this sweater. Also, there are a few tweaks that I made to my cardigan based off of the reference photo that are different, and I will get into those. So the first, I think probably most notable thing is that the actual cardigan goes into reverse stockinette for kind of like the shoulders on the front, and the front and back like large diamond cables don't match up on the actual version. You'll see that I had some issues with sizing when I first started knitting this cardigan, and since I had to kind of start over again anyway, I decided to rework the pattern to basically force the cables to match at the shoulders, which I think it just works better for a hand knit cardigan. I also mirrored all of the cables so that they go the correct direction on each side instead of having all of them go just one way. Next is I put 3 buttons on my cardigan instead of 2. They have just 2 buttons, and the second one is like, or the one at the bottom is quite high up, so I wanted to just even that out, kind of standard cardigan button spacing. And then the last thing, I knit this in wool. I think the one that they were selling was an acrylic blend. I don't know for sure because the page is gone. I can't verify that. But the fabric that the actual cardigan is made out is much drapier than my version because I chose to do mine in wool. And so their sleeves are longer and kind of do like a little puddly balloon sleeve thing, but because I didn't have that drapey texture, I didn't want to have my sleeves be so long that they would be like covering my hands. And to compensate a little bit for that, I put a slight taper to the sleeve so it is a little bit more narrow at the hand instead of being straight all the way across. While I was knitting this, I was actually really nervous about the sleeves because I don't typically like a super wide open sleeve, but I actually genuinely like these. I'm very much surprised by it. Last very small design differences is I put more cables on the back and I made the cables a little bit smaller. So the original version has the 3 large diamonds on it and then 2 larger, just simple twist cables. But I made it every other large diamond and simple twist cable, but then to make the sizing correct, I had to size down that cable. And I think that covers all of the little design differences, so let's get into the actual sweater. The yarn I used for this sweater is Knitting for Olive's Heavy Merino yarn in the shade Pearl Gray. And I used 11 full balls and just like a smidgen of the 12th ball. I had originally bought 10 balls for this cardigan, but I forgot that like balloon sleeves take quite a bit more yarn than I was expecting, so I did have to order more later, and I didn't have any issues with the dye lots not matching, so that was good news. I knit this entire cardigan in pieces, so front piece, back piece, and then 2 sleeves that are exactly the same. The front pieces are the same too, but they're mirrored of each other so that the cables go the correct way. This is a 44-inch cardigan around the body, and for me, I have a 38-inch bust, so that gives me 6 inches of positive ease. For the vast majority of the sweater, I used US size 7 needles, but for the ribbing on the sleeves and the ribbing on the neckline, I used US size 5, but honestly, I probably could have even gone down further for this ribbing, just because I could have had it just a little bit tighter, so maybe even US 4 could be good. But for the ribbing on the body, I did knit that in US 7 because I didn't want that taper at all on the body. Because it is an oversized sweater, I wanted it to just go straight down. So construction-wise, obviously it's all knit in pieces, and then from there I blocked each piece individually when I finished it because my drying mat is only so large. And then when they were all done, I was able to sew the whole thing together, and I just sewed it together with mattress stitch. So I think the most complicated things about this cardigan are the neckline decreases as well as the cables. So let's get into the cables first. Each of the pieces for this cardigan are knit from the bottom up, and to get like the little cable starting here, which it was a feature I really liked of the actual cardigan, you are starting the cable chart at a slightly different point. You're not starting it at row 1. So the chart for the diamond is just diamond shape. Instead of starting it at the very tip of the diamond, you're starting at row 40, which is just before the very end of the chart. What you'll do with every chart is knit to the very end of the chart and then start it over again at the beginning. So this one, I tell you in the pattern, start it at row 40, you'll knit it up to the end of that diamond there, and then you'll restart at the beginning, row 1, to knit all of the rest of them. The other slightly different thing about the large diamond cable, oh, hi Bubba. Jack is joining us as always. I'm sure you'll see his tail flying around here. But the other thing about the large diamond cable is it is a 3-stitch cable. Like this section is 3 stitches, but it goes knit, purl, knit. And I have a specific video to show that in a little bit. Now the next slightly complicated thing about this pattern is the V-neck decreases, because they don't stay in one spot. So like normally if you are knitting a V-neck, you can place a stitch marker and you're gonna decrease at the same point every single time. But instead on this one, we're removing the cables in a specific pattern. So the first thing you're gonna do is remove the large kind of flat braid here, and you stay in the same spot, removing this braid the entire time. And then you remove a couple of purl stitches here before decreasing out this kind of middle skinny cable, and then lastly, the last skinny cable. And I think that just about covers all of the most complicated parts of this cardigan. I would definitely say this is not like a beginner-friendly cardigan to knit. It's something that if you have knit a few cardigans or sweaters, or you're very comfortable with cables and figuring things out, it won't be that bad. I mean, it's pretty standard practice for a cable cardigan. However, if you are very new to reading charts or reading patterns, it will definitely be a challenge. And with that, I will get into the little cable tutorial. So I am working on the second front side of the cardigan. So this is going to be the V-neck edge, and then this is going to be the side seam. For the most part, all of these cables are very simple. These are just 2-stitch cables. This is a 4-stitch cable. This is a 6-stitch kind of a braid. I'm following what they did on the pattern, which is basically like the center 2 stitches go out, go out, go out, go out. So it's almost like an inside out braid, and it's also quite long. So these and these are a 4-row repeat, and then this is a 6-row repeat. And the large diamond is kind of like the most interesting cable. So although I know it looks like it is a 2-stitch cable here, it's actually 3 stitches. So this is a knit, purl, knit, and that's how you can kind of get this little twist here. It's how you get the twist here and have that actually stand out. So really the only like thing to note with the chart is that this is going to look like a 3/1 cable throughout pretty much most of this, except for it's not It's not just knitting 3 off of the cable needle, it's actually knit purl knit. And you can kind of see that a little bit better here at the top. You can see that that's pearls. And I will zoom in and actually show you knitting this. So I've worked up to the cable, and for this section, as we're narrowing back in, the cable's going up like that. You're basically trading one of these pearls from the inside of the diamond to the outside of the diamond. And I always like to do my cabling without a cable needle, so I'm just going to pick this up from the back of the work because it's going to stay in the back. Push that off and then get that back on the needle. So these have now traded places, and I'm just going to knit across in pattern. So this remains a purl stitch. Oops, a little bit tight there. This is a purl stitch. And then, like I said, this is knit, purl, knit. Knit, purl, knit, and then go back to purling the inside of the diamond. But that's it. It's a pretty easy cable pattern overall. It's just very large. Here I am, sitting in my office, minding my own business, when I see that Taylor Allison Swift has released a new cardigan for the Tortured Poets Department. And it's not the same cardigan as all of the other cardigans, just in a different color. We actually have a new cardigan design, which means, of course, I'm gonna dupe it. I actually much prefer the design of this cardigan, and it has some really nice looking cables to it. So I think we have a couple of small cables, the really, really large, like diamond shaped cable motif, as well as a couple of braids, and that's it. So we're gonna just start working out the cables. That is all of the swatching done. So I have obviously the very big diamonds. It's kind of hard to see while it's wet, but I do have the little twists here at the corner, a twist there. We have the kind of flat-sided braid, a skinny braid, and then, or skinny cable, and then this cable I thought was too tight, which is why I did it again here. A medium cable, a larger cable, and then this is just a more traditional braid. So we'll let these dry and see what happens. I have got a lot to update you on with the process of this sweater, so let's get into it. So after looking at all of the pictures, zooming in, trying to like see what was going on with the stitches, I had counted, I guess, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different types of cables. And so I started off this whole project by collecting the cat. I started this whole project with swatching all of the cables to make sure that I got everything that I needed, as well as the stitch counts for the cables, because this is kind of an all over cabled sweater. There's very, very limited amounts of like filler stitches. So knowing how big and how wide the cables are is going to determine how big the sweater is. This was the first swatch. I have a 2-stitch cable. Oh, all right. So this is the first swatch. I have a 2-stitch cable, a 4-stitch cable, a 6-stitch cable, and then a 6-stitch kind of traditional 3-strand braid. I apologize for how much Jack is going to be in and out of the frame for this, but he thinks I'm talking to him. So what can you do? When I wrapped up this first swatch, I thought the first 2-stitch cable, which I was doing the cable on every right side row, it just looked too tight. So I wanted to do a 4-row repeat for that. And I noticed that the cable that's kind of on the front side, that's a braid, is almost more flat looking than the braid on the sleeves. And not almost, it certainly is. So I made this like a traditional braid. And then I wanted to see what it would look like basically with just more space in between the cable rows for the braid, and that definitely gave it that more flat look. And then the last one is the big diamond. So this one I did end up fussing around quite a bit on it. I was basing the sizing off of vibes. I wasn't really going off of much of anything until my future sister-in-law did send me a bunch of pictures of her actual cardigan with some measurements so that I could have like a better idea of how things were looking. But this is the one that, it's the biggest cable, so I really wanted it to be correct. And also It's just the largest. It takes up the most visual room. I wanted it to be as proportional as possible without knitting it at like the tiniest like machine knit gauge. So for this, I ended up doing these cables where it's a knit purl knit. And when you look at it, it kind of just looks like 2 stitches. I was hoping that blocking it would kind of give that a little bit more space, but doing that does give this kind of twist here at the corners that the cable does, and that's one of the features of the cable on the actual sweater that I really liked. So I wanted to make sure that I had that and it wasn't just like a simple diamond and it had that little twist there. So the way that I did that is by doing the knit purl knit. Then kind of the same thing here. It doesn't pop quite as much as I was hoping for, but there's a twist within this strand as well as twisting over the other strand of the cable. So there is 2 twists going on in the same kind of like spot, which the stitches do regardless of whether or not that's super, super clear with this yarn. So after I got all of my swatches done, I measured everything out, counted stitches, had like an idea of what I was working with. I started plotting them out to see how they would fit in the pattern, how many of each cable. I'm putting 2 purl stitches in between most cables to kind of spread them out just a little bit, give a little bit of breathing room, and working on the actual sizing for my size. What I wanted for this cardigan is to get a slightly oversized fit, but not too oversized. I'm not someone who particularly likes a super, super oversized sweater. So what I'm aiming for is in between this burgundy cardigan and my oversized seasons cardigan. So what I did was I measured them both out. I like laid them flat on the floor, measured out, you know, everything, the total length, the total width, the arms, the how deep is the arm side, all of that kind of stuff. And essentially just figured out the difference and got some goal numbers for this cardigan that's kind of in between both of those. So with my goal size in mind, all of the measurements and stitch counts for the cables worked out, then I started plotting out how were they going to fit in the actual sweater for my size. And when I was doing that, I immediately found that this diamond that I had first charted is just slightly too big. If I were to keep it this exact same size, it would just be too oversized to be able to fit the same number of cables on the back. So it's like 3 of these diamond cables plus 2, I think, of the largest simple twist cables. So I basically just sized this down to like what would be like the inside. So if you visualize, instead of like this being the outside of the cable, this being the outside of the cable, it's just 3 stitches in on each side from my original swatch to make the numbers work so that it still has the same look without being too oversized, because that is my preference. So with the new chart for the large diamond, I was able to put together all of the different panels as well as estimate what I want the V-neck to do. I am doing a tiny amount of sleeve shaping. It is a drop shoulder sweater, so I'm not going too crazy with that. And I prefer to figure out my short rows on the fly for the shoulders. So I'm going to be knitting this from the bottom up. And then once I get to the shoulders, I will write down what I do because I don't want to sit around and fiddle with numbers before I even get there. And today is an exciting day because the yarn has finally come. So I was thinking quite a bit about what I wanted this cardigan to look like. I wanted it to be in a gray, but not quite as dark of a gray, so that the cables stand out really well. And I wanted to do it in this Knitting for Olive heavy merino because I think it's a really beautiful yarn. And for like the quality of this yarn, I think it's quite a reasonable price. Fairly confident this is a European brand, so I think it is kind of significantly cheaper there, but I was able to purchase this from Woolen Company in the United States. The shipping is really, really fast in the Midwest, and it's $10 per ball, and I got 10 balls. So I'm not entirely sure how much yarn I'm going to need for this, but that felt like a good amount, which clocks the yarn in for this sweater at $100, which I can be like quite bougie with my yarn, and I can also be incredibly cheap with my yarn. So $100 feels like a solid medium amount to spend on a sweater. And I am fully well aware that if I had tried to purchase the actual cardigan, it would have been like $80. But I think that catches you up on everything for now. I'm going to cast on and get started.
Having a literal math not mathing situation. I had done all of my swatches and then I ended up making the diamond shape a little bit smaller in order to fit the math. The goal was for the sweater to be a little bit larger than this maroon sweater I'm going to show you. And I did all the math and it was working. And even if we think about blocking it, it's way smaller than it should be. So the idea is that this maroon sweater here, it's supposed to be slightly larger than that sweater. And here we are. Even with blocking, there's no way that that would not, it's simply not gonna work. Like, the math doesn't work. That's a real shame because I'm gonna have to rip all of this out. Ooh. So I have decided to block the remainder of what I had started on the back panel to see how far off I am. So I have soaked it, I have it up here on the mat, and we are going to measure it when it is dry and see. Basically, I think what I'm going to have to do is put the diamond back to what I had it at originally. So I guess I'll probably just do that anyway. But here we are. It didn't really grow at all with blocking. So yeah. Well, quite the whirlwind yesterday since I did my little lunchtime update. So proud of all of the things that I had gotten done. And then in the evening, as you saw, I found or noticed that the panel I had been knitting is way too small, and I basically had to rework the entire pattern. So I got up early today and I did a bunch of math before work. I basically went through, I measured what I had done for the back panel last night, got the gauge of that whole thing if we're like averaging out what's stockinette and which cables, and then I went and measured the cable width of every swatch that I had done. In the first round of the pattern, I did account for the fact that like cables obviously take up less room than those stitches in stockinette, but I didn't do enough. So what I did is I measured the width of each cable individually and then added those up for the different panels that I would need to figure out if we were actually going to be close enough to the width that I need for the sweater itself. And we are back to using my original larger sized large diamond. While I was already making updates to the pattern because I basically had to mostly redo all of the numbers because this changed so much, I decided to fix a couple of things that I don't really like with the original version. So the original Tortured Poets cardigan, the V-neck cuts into the large diamond cable on the front and kind of cuts it off because there's just not enough room for the cable anymore. The V-neck goes through it. But I didn't really like how that looked because it ends at kind of a weird spot and then it's reverse stockinette up into the shoulder. And then even if that cable did go all the way up, it wouldn't match the cable on the back. That's the same type of cable. It's the same large diamond cable, but they're just offset a little bit. So essentially what I've done is I've worked the V-neck to not cut into the large diamond on the front of the sweater, and then I've rearranged the cables very slightly on the back so that it matches exactly. So like this, outer side part of the front is going to be flipped and exactly the same on the back. So in the original pattern, there were two side cables on the front. I took one of those out, so now there's just one on the side. That moves the cable over a tiny bit, and then I put a cable onto the back. So on the original sweater, it's large diamond, cable, large diamond, cable, large diamond, that's it. But now mine's going to be cable, large diamond, large diamond, all the way across so that it has the cable that will match up on the shoulder seam. So I did end up losing, 2 days worth of work on the back of the sweater. So I decided it would probably be a better use of my time to try casting on the front of the sweater, because if it's wrong, then it's less work to rip it back because it's, half the length. So I'm going to get started casting on the front of the sweater, and hopefully with the new numbers, this is all going to work out a lot better. Good morning, happy Sunday. I have just finished the first front side of the cardigan, so let me show you what I've got going on here. Obviously, she's gonna need a pretty good blocking, but I'm really happy with how it's turning out so far. We have a huge, like 2 inches of neckline to add to this, which adds a lot of width, but I have the cables going. I'm really happy with the switched out larger cables. I think this like wide cable worked really well. I think the most difficult thing to write out is how these decreases work, because they start here to decrease out this big cable first, and then you decrease out some of the pearls, and then you decrease this cable coming from here over, and then again some pearls, and then this cable from here over to get to the top. I did also add some short rows. I don't think they're the most like elegant thing in the world, but I wanted to be able to have at least a little bit. It's about 1 inch. This is where the neckline decreases stop, so about 1 inch or so. And I did keep this cable moving even though this one stops earlier, but if I do this correctly and have the back match the front exactly, they should still meet up. So hopefully that's gonna work. Now I need to do the second front, which is just this but mirrored the other way around. And I'm going to take better notes on how I did the decreases as I go, so hopefully that will make sense. Hello, it has been a while. I just got back from a very lovely long weekend camping trip in the Black Hills. It was stunning. And came home to look and see how much yarn I have left, because I just finished my first sleeve, to see that I don't have enough yarn to finish this project. I don't even have enough yarn to finish my second sleeve. Not my favorite thing. I mean, I completely guesstimated how much yarn that I was going to need based off of other patterns that are kind of a similar shape with the same type of yarn, and clearly I forgot to account for the fact that this cardigan has balloon sleeves. And it's not, they're not like super balloony, but it has really wide sleeves, and that uses a lot more yarn than a tapered sleeve would. So obviously I needed more yarn than what I had originally ordered. And the yarn that I had originally ordered from Wool & Company, they just don't have the same color anymore. So I was looking up to see where could I find of yarn that is in the United States already, so I'm not ordering it from Europe because I feel like that would just take quite a bit longer, in the same color from the same brand. And I was able to buy it from Shop La Mercerie, which is in Portland, I think, Oregon, and it is already shipped. So fingers crossed it will be here soon, but let me give you a little overview of how things are looking. So we have the front and backs completely done. I did seam the shoulders so I could see like how far down on the arm it goes, to kind of guesstimate or estimate this length a little bit better. And then this is the first sleeve, which, as you can see, quite wide. There is a little bit of a taper. This like stockinette section doesn't start at the beginning, so you are tapering very slightly, I think to about here, but it is a very, very wide sleeve. It uses about 2 1/4 of these balls, so I have 1 3/4-ish left here, just cast on the second sleeve, and I'm really hoping that I don't have any dye lot issues. I will be able to get the vast majority of the second sleeve done in the original dye lot, and then the only thing that's left is the neckline. But with all of that in mind, hoping that there's not like some issue with the post office, I should be able to finish this maybe this week. I need to get the first sleeve blocked so I can add that on, and then I would just need to knit the second sleeve and knit the neckline, and then we're gonna be done. I can't believe that we're getting here, but we're close. We are like approaching the finish line. Look what arrived. I'll put it down because it's noisy, but we are finally back in business. The post office delayed delivering my yarn for like several days. I don't know exactly what happened there, but I have my yarn. I can finally
finished this cardigan.
I just finished. Oh my God. I love it.
If you have made it this far into the video, I thought I might as well treat you to my thoughts on the actual album, The Tortured Poets Department. So I did something I've never done with this album before, and I took literal notes as I was listening to it for the very first time, and then I took notes about a week later, and then right now we're almost 1 month after it has released. I am sitting here waiting for my yarn to arrive, which has not arrived yet, and I figured I've got some time, so I might as well talk about it. So when the album released, I didn't take off work, I probably should have, but I got up extra early that day so that I could listen to the entire album, like headphones on, zoned in, before starting the day. And I had expected that there would be a second part to the album because of all of the twos that she was doing, but I didn't expect it to be an entire second album. Which that's just a lot of content. So when I first listened to the entire thing from beginning to end, I think I really got into like almost music overload for the second half of the album. And I don't know if I was just not paying as close attention or what was happening, but the second half of the album was just not hitting as hard when I listened to it at like 6 o'clock in the morning on the day that it released. These are the songs that hit me on my very first listen. Was Down Bad, LOML, Fortnight, I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, Clara Bow, The Alchemy, I Can Fix Him No Really I Can, and then on the second half, The Albatross, How Did It End, The Prophecy, Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus. And then for just some general notes that I took while I was listening, I was basically saying, hi Jackie. I've got Jackie, we will review my notes together. So I said the first half of the album had more 80s vibes than I'm generally into, and then the second half was more of like a folklore times Midnights mashup, which I actually really like. The front half of the album also had some Lana Del Rey energy. I said, But Daddy I Loved Him could have been on Red, and I stand by that. I'm glad that the features are actually featured on this album because I was one of the very many who just could not hear Lana Del Rey on Snow on the Beach the first time around. My mind has changed on this one a little bit. I said LOML is better than So Long London, but I think it's that I find LOML sadder than So Long London, and usually you would expect that track 5 to hit harder, for me at least. And then I said The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived, Kill Him Sis. That is like the most cutting song that she has ever released. So those were my first impressions of the album, and then I did another check-in about a week later, having had the chance to like listen to it a little bit more, marinate in the songs better, really get into the second half of the album, which I now much prefer to the first half. But 1 week in, these were my top songs. There's a lot of them, so hold on. In no particular order, it's I Can Fix Him No Really I Can, The Prophecy, Cassandra, The Albatross, LOML, Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus, So Long London, Down Bad, How Did It End, My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys, Clara Bow, Who's Afraid of Little Old Me, Fortnight, Florida, I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived, and TTPD. And now that we are a good solid month in, I have given the entire album a lot of listens to in the last few weeks. I have changed my mind on quite a bit of the songs. And you'll hear from my top songs from a month in that I'm really vibing with the second half of the album. I just feel like the songs are more folklore, Evermore vibes, which is how I became a Swiftie in the first place. So obviously that's what I like to listen to the most. So 1 month in, I wrote down The Prophecy, The Albatross, The Bolter, Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus, Cassandra, I Hate It Here, So Long London, Down Bad, Guilty as Sin, My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys, I Look in People's Windows, How Did It End, LOML. And those songs are definitely getting the most playthrough for me, and you can see I do love a sad song. And in general, I think this is, at least in my opinion, probably her saddest album. Songs like The Prophecy, Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus, How Did It End, LOML are heartbreaking, and I'm feeling them a lot more than I have with some of her other sad songs from previous albums. And I don't know if that's just the novelty of it, because I've heard all of her other songs so many times that it doesn't hit quite as hard. And with these being new, you don't know them as well. I still don't have all the words memorized. Bless you. So I made a note on like the very first morning when I listened to the entire album that I didn't think that this album would get a lot of re-listens from me because it's so sad. And I still think that's kind of true, but for a different reason, I think, than I was originally thinking. And I think it's because the whole 31 songs, which is so many, hits a lot of different notes. So I do find it still kind of hard to listen to the whole thing from beginning to end because one, it's very long, and two, because it goes all over the place with like really high energy songs like So High School and But Daddy I Love Him, and then like some of the saddest songs that you've ever heard. So this album, much more than a lot of her other albums, it doesn't have like an overarching theme for me, right? So I'm like, if I want to listen to something fun, it's 1989. If I want to listen to something that's like moody and fall and just like cozy vibes, you listen to Red, and that's still kind of upbeat. If you want something cozy but a little bit more down, Folklore and Evermore. When I am in like work mode and I need to get things done, I listen to Reputation. But this isn't one of those albums where I feel like I have an overarching like feeling with it because the songs are kind of all over the place. But if you have made it this far into the video, I would love to hear your thoughts on the album as well. All right, I think that is everything I could possibly say about my Tortured Poets Department cardigan. I hope you have liked it. I hope you found it useful, and I will see you next time. Bye.